broadcasting from the Unshackled studios in Melbourne. This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the unshackled.net. Now here's Tim Wilms.
Hello everybody and welcome to this week's WilmsFront Snapshot news show, coming to you here on this Monday, the 3rd of November 2025. It is 8:30 p.m. here in Melbourne, Victoria, Melbourne Cup Eve. Not that I'm into horse racing. We are live on the WilmsFront YouTube channel, the WilmsFront Rumble channel, and my WilmsFront X account. Now, let's get straight into the news, starting with the latest here in Victoria.
This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the unshackled.net.
The Victorian statewide treaty bill passed the state parliament last Thursday. So this will mean, despite the fact that almost 54% of Victorians voted no to the voice to parliament in the 2023 referendum, the Allan Labor government, this treaty process, Victoria's going to get the full Makarrata, so voice, truth, treaty. Dan Andrews started it and continued it despite the result of the voice referendum here in Victoria. So remember, there's the First People's Assembly that's already in place, and then there was the Yurok Justice Commission. Now, with the passage of the treaty legislation, the First People's Assembly is now going to become a new statutory corporation called Gulling Wall. Now, what does that mean? It translates to tip of the spear or pointed spear in the Gunnery language. So it sounds very reconciliation, which of course it doesn't seem to be the goal anymore. It is all about literally division and having a separate category of people here in Victoria. So this new Gulling Wall statutory corporation, it'll be funded by Victorian taxpayers for more than 70 million per year, have 33 representatives who are voted by Indigenous voters, all 65,000 of them. Now, remember, if you saw you can see some of them in the photo in the corner. Many of those who identify as Aboriginal in Victoria are not full-blooded. They have lighter skin, but they're going to get all of the benefits of this treaty because, of course, there's the Allan Labor government has not ruled out reparations, as was recommended by the Yurok Justice Commission. So what this new Gulling Wall will do is that it will offer guidance to government departments and agencies on laws and policies on all Indigenous matters. And now some of this body will be exempt from freedom of information laws because they'll be covered by Cabinet in confidence. They'll be exempt from land tax. They'll get their own meeting room in the Parliament House. They will co-design a new Indigenous truth-telling education curriculum for students prep to year 10. and they will get to set their own rules on how government departments and agencies must consult on programs and policies related to Indigenous people and culture. They will oversee Aboriginal community infrastructure funding and will act as a naming authority for geographical features in Victoria, which could potentially rename national parks, waterways, and this could also lead to them being restricted as well to non-Indigenous Victorians. So this, of course, is just the beginning, and we got a preview of what this new era of co-governance, that's what they had in Victoria, where despite the fact we're supposed to be a representative democracy, one vote, one value, or we're supposed to be all equal before the law, there is going to be a group of Victorians, majority of whom have mixed Aboriginal and European ancestry, who are going to have special rights. And we got a bit of a preview of that with St Vincent's Hospital in Melbourne. They were actually nominated for a Victorian Public Healthcare Award for their emergency department policy that all First Nations patients presenting automatically assigned a minimum triage category 3, meaning urgent, requiring treatment within 30 minutes of arrivals. So this applies regardless of patients presenting symptoms or assessed medical urgency, so potentially prioritizing them over non-Indigenous patients in category 4, which is semi-urgent, and category 5, non-urgent. Now, the argument that has been made by some healthcare professionals is because Indigenous people have more likely to have chronic health conditions as they have a lower life expectancy. But again, anyone identifying as Aboriginal, regardless of socioeconomic background, or because remember that all these other cultural groups could also claim down the track, well, we need special treatment because of this condition in our culture, race of people. And what if, because of this new policy, a non-Indigenous Victorian is bumped down in category 4 and they die because they were bumped down from the queue? Victorians could actually die because of this. And we've had already in Victoria for many decades the Curie courts, and there's also some suggestion that from some African community leaders that there should be some African tribal court here in Victoria. So again, there's going to, in this era of we were taught that we're not supposed to generalize based on race. People shouldn't get special privileges based on race, but the whole trend has been for treating Indigenous people as they are different from the rest of it. So of course, we're entering the identitarian era. Of course, it's bad if white people lobby based on racial interests, but it's certainly okay if those who have Aboriginal ethnicity in them lobby for their interests, and all the other various ethnic groups here. Now, it doesn't seem that when this treaty is signed, the sovereignty is not going to be ceded. It's wherever going. It means that sovereignty is forever going to be shared. As I said, this is never going to end. Reconciliation, it doesn't seem to be a goal anymore. It's all about having having this system where Indigenous, those who identify Indigenous are elevated to democratic decision making. Although we are told that the Victorian Parliament will retain as it's called, parliamentary sovereignty. The Liberal and National opposition here in Victoria have promised to repeal the treaty within 100 days. But they've also said they're going to establish a statutory First Nations Victoria body. So they're trying to say, we oppose this, but we're still going to have all these policies to close the gap. So remember, this is just the beginning. There is going to be more separatism, discrimination, and of course, costs to the taxpayer. Victorians will be banned from more national parks and areas. So it's not about unity at all. And of course, the most divisive, one of the most divisive Aboriginal Victorians is Lydia Thorpe, the independent federal senator. We don't have an update on the federal police investigation from when she told the pro-Palestine rally that she would even burn Parliament down to achieve her goals. Now, she decided that she would put out a Halloween video to feed her trolls.
Oh, it's a scary day today in the colony, and yep, it's a scary black woman. I think it's time to go feed the trolls. Whoa. Let's start with this one. Australia is a racist colony. Here we go, trolls. White Australia has a black history. Trolls. Remember this one? Not my king. Here we go, trolls. Eat that one. And, of course, fuck the colony. Eat it up, trolls.
I didn't know that in Aboriginal English, I already knew that black doesn't have the C, so it's B-L-A-K. But I didn't also know that fuck is spelled F-U-K, so it doesn't have the C in it either. And now Lydia Thorpe is claiming that she's feeding the trolls, even though it's actually the reverse. The trolls, the trolls feed her, and of course, probably the most notable time that she fed. Well, the trolls fed her was, of course, when there was that Warrior of the Convict Resistance video where the Aboriginal flag was burnt by a masked man, and then she did that it was at the height of the Voice referendum. She did that press conference where she was wearing sunglasses and chewing gum. She looked extremely like she was on something, and she accused Anthony Albanese of wanting the Voice referendum and the fucking fascists to wanting to get her. But I'll tell you what is scary is her uncle, Robbie Thorpe. And now you may remember him as the founder of Camp Sovereignty in the King's Domain. Well, he is challenging the terror listing of Hamas in the federal court, attempting to argue it limits Australia's implied freedom of political communication in Australia by chilling discussion of Palestinian strategies to resist Israeli occupation. I couldn't believe this when I read this. So yes, they're a charming bunch, the Thorpe family, and it's families, Aboriginal families like them, the most divisive that will be empowered by this treaty and the this new body, the Gelling Worrell. Now, it's going to come into effect before the state election, June 2026. So the Victorian state election is due in last Saturday in November 2026. So Victorians will get to pass a judgment on this treaty, and of course all the other policy disasters by the Allen Labor government.
This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net.
Now, the other policy disaster that the Allen Labor government is overseeing, well, the watering down of the state's bail laws was introduced by Jacinta Allen's predecessor, Dan Andrews, of course, in response to an Aboriginal woman dying in custody. And of course, now we have almost every day, either organised crime incident, a violent event, or there's a home invasion, or there's a machete fight. And now, of course, where do you actually start? Let's start in chronological order. So this actually happened over a week ago. This was in Clyde. It's a suburb in Melbourne's southeast, a very Indian suburb. And the Indians in Melbourne, they seem to get targeted a lot in home invasions. A lot of them live out in the western suburbs where a lot of these youth gangs target as well. So this was over a week ago now, this Indian family trying to keep these knife-wielding home invaders from breaking into their home.
Two masked offenders tried to kick open their front door just before 3 o'clock. The sound of glass shattering and a blaring alarm woke the family. They went outside to check out the noise before the offenders chased them back to the door, one of them armed with a knife.
The whole family is shattered, scared.
The terrified family scrambled inside and held the door closed as they screamed for help. The thugs fled in a waiting SUV.
Then we had a grandmother in Brighton whose home was broken into by armed intruders. I remember when the Dan Stans, the Labor Drips, they were all mocking Beck Judd for saying that there was a crime crisis in Brighton. But she was nicknamed Super Gran. She stood her ground, and even armed with weapons, these youths, they cowered in the face of a no nonsense old school grandma.
Monday morning in Brighton East, and a carload of young criminals pull up to a multi-million-dollar home. One has a knife. They hop the fence, then break in, completely unaware they're about to be confronted by one angry grandma.
So I stood here, and he's standing there with his knife up here. He said, "I want your car keys." And I said, "No." And then I said, "Get out of my house." And I said it again, "Get out of my house."
76-year-old Patricia was in her dressing gown, calling out to her daughter to call police.
And I said, "The police are coming." Out they went. So I scared them off.
That's clear. The pair was quick to jump the fence, sprinting to their getaway car, speeding off empty-handed.
It's dreadful, absolutely dreadful. I mean, it was frightening enough for me. Get rid of the lot of them that do it. Lock them up.
But tonight, they're still on the run.
My message is the community's getting very fed up and sick and tired of not being safe in their own home. Go out, get a job and, do something good for the community, not cause harm.
While the grandmother has this plea to the Premier.
Do something and do it quick.
Patricia has lived here for decades and is determined not to let the crime crisis affect her day-to-day life. She's refusing to relocate and was even back out on the tennis court today and is already taking precautions.
That coach wasn't there. We put that there yesterday in case they come back.
But with a voice like this,
get out of my house.
Hopefully they know better. Jordan Quinn, 7 News.
There has also been a home invasion in the northern suburb of Thomastown. So this just happened overnight. So it was in the boulevard. So Faisal Nassim, he and his family were confronted by 5 machete-wielding teens, and they demanded the car keys. Again, they fled empty-handed, spooked by the family's neighbours. It's good that they all, in these 3 home invasions, they have left empty-handed. Of course, that doesn't discount the terror that these homeowners and their families would have felt. And of course, we need castle law here in Victoria, where homeowners can defend themselves with weapons. Shouty words, of course, are not going to work all of the time. There have been people who have been killed by these youth gang home invaders for attempting to confront them. Remember Ash Gordon, that doctor last year? I think it's still before the courts. Then, of course, so machete is still used in home invasions. So machete bins aren't working. And also, machete fights are still occurring in the suburbs. This occurred in Wyndham Vale in Melbourne's West on Halloween. And it wasn't some youths in ghost face masks with fake knives pretending to stab people. This was real.
Knife-wielding teens have fought a running battle in front of horrified neighbours as children were out trick-or-treating in Melbourne's West. It was the final straw for one resident who's now moving in search of a safer suburb.
A Halloween gang fight just as families were out trick-or-treating. It happened just after 6 p.m. in Wyndham Vale. 2 boys were being targeted by hooded thugs armed with a knife. The battle went back and forth before they came to blows. Inevitably, one of the boys was slashed with the knife.
It's disgusting. It's always happening and there's just no concern or care for anyone.
It's just unsafe. I mean, the crime rate is just spiraling out of control, so we need some type of,
There was also, and I've put the picture, the CCTV picture in the right-hand corner of the screen. A teenage couple were confronted in Belgrave, which is in Melbourne's far east were confronted by two machete-wielding teens. The boy was actually struck with the machete in his arm. He didn't realise until later. So this occurred at 7:10 p.m. last Wednesday, and Victoria Police have apprehended a 15-year-old boy and a 13-year-old boy, both from the Munro area. And now they have been remanded to appear before the Children's Court. That doesn't mean that they might not get bail, and detectives are working to identify a third alleged offender. Then there was on November 1, which is Saturday, there was a shooting in the car park of a Bayswater shopping centre. It's actually near Belgrave in that general area. So a man was shot in a car park. Then the shooter fled via vehicle. The man went to a nearby home where ambulances were called. And then there was a woman who was stabbed in the thigh by two men in a car at a business car park in Collaroo. That's near Broadmeadows. Then there was also a Father Mark Jessam. He was the victim of an alleged carjacking, and they slashed his daughter's child car seat. That was in Glen Iris, which is an inner east suburb, sort of near Caulfield. But now this is all, the footage that I showed you is all from the commercial media. And yes, the ABC, they have its 7:30 program has done some good reports on the increase in crime in Victoria, including retail thefts. But on Friday night, you had one of its reporters, Norman Hermont. I pronounce his name like that because he's Canadian, though he's been with the ABC for 20 years. So he posted braving the crime-ridden violent hellhole that is Melbourne CBD to get some gelato. And the Labor member for Mordialloc, Tim Richardson, who's also the Minister for Men's Behavioural Change, a lot of those youth men aren't changing their behaviour, said Melbourne is the best city in the world. Don't let people talk our amazing city. From 82,000 people at the cricket, that was the T20 between Australia and India on Friday night. The crowd was probably about 90% Indian. The cheers were louder for the Indian team than it was for the Australians. To the 180,000 sing along at Oasis, that was the biggest white pilgrimage I've seen in Melbourne outside of Anzac Day, I must say. To the 200,000 going to the Melbourne Cup Carnival. Melbourne and Victoria have it all. So you'll hear this in the lead up to the next election, that the Liberal and National opposition, all they're interested in is punching down Melbourne and Victoria. They're not for Victoria. And Dan Andrews did a lot of this during COVID and the lead up to the 2022 state election. So there is a lot of what you call these either crime deniers or crime deflectors.
This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net.
Though you did have Jacinta Allen's Attorney General, Sonia Kilkenny, the member for Carrum, which is near where I live, well, it's the electorate over. She said that the youth crime crisis is something we have never seen before. And obviously Jacinta Allen's deputy, Ben Carroll, went rogue previously, saying that we need to throw the full force of the law at these youth offenders. Now, the Victorian government, they putting Thomas Sewell behind bars, that doesn't seem to have made Melbourne or Victoria safer. He was remanded in custody because it was claimed that he was at risk of further harm to the community. Thomas Sewell last week was found not guilty of offensive behaviour for when the National Socialist Network marched through the main street of Ballarat in December 2023 on the 150-year anniversary of the Eureka Stockade, holding the sign Australia for the White Man. You may recall at the time there was some young white man in the street who did a Nazi salute when he saw them. Victoria Police crash tackled him to the ground, and they gave him a caution and some re-education. Now, this charge that they slapped Thomas Sewell with, offensive behaviour, that was the new offence that was created after Richard Pussy filmed those dying Victoria Police officers after a truck had crashed into them after they pulled him over its Porsche when on the Eastern Freeway. Victoria Police have tried to use it for a politically motivated charge against Thomas Sewell, but almost 2 years later, he was found not guilty in the Ballarat Magistrates Court. So the magistrate in this case, Mike Wardell, said that it had not been proven that Mr. Sewell's conduct was deeply or seriously insulting. Behaviour deemed unacceptably offensive by some may not trouble others at all. The test is whether the impunged behaviour is so deeply and seriously insulting as to warrant the interference in the criminal law. The principles of democratic governance have had difficulty in accommodating laws designed to deal with offensive behaviour. The danger, therefore, is that legislation which turns offensive conduct into a crime and punishable accordingly will be employed as a heavy-handed instrument by imposition by one segment of society or another. Society is evolving, attitudes change over time, fringe groups are appearing more often and agitated about a variety of issues. In this case, taking into account the context and circumstances of the events of December 3, 2023, I'm not satisfied the tests have been met by your conduct and find you not guilty. Of course, Thomas Sewell, he had to represent himself from a jail cell. He has been on remand ever since when he was hit with how many charges was it? Over 20 charges when he led the National Socialist Network charging at Aboriginal camp sovereignty after the August 31st March for Australia, accusing it of being an Antifa coordination hub that day. Now, of course, White Australia, they are trying to register their political party, though the federal police, with their, their new national security surveillance investigations, are concerned about the National Socialist Network wanting to register a political party. This was before the Senate committee, or the Joint Standing Committee, I should say, on electoral matters. So Jack Eltis has said they're close to the 1,500 members required to register with the Australian Electoral Commission. They just released their latest propaganda documentary, National Socialist Network White Australia, called Winter Nationals, which also features Jimone Roberts pouring milk over two Antifa journalists trying to get into their national conference back in August and kick one of their side mirrors. Jimone Roberts was sentenced to 100 days in prison for his spray at grandmothers for refugees back at the beginning of 2024. So he was given 100 days imprisonment as a general deterrence. So I won't play the video again, but Jim says stuff like because it was after Vilene White had been stabbed to death in an Ipswich shopping centre, allegedly by a Sudanese teenager. Jimone Roberts said to them, "I hope they stab you next. I hope you die of a heart attack tonight." Of course, he was a lot more profane than my paraphrasing there. So, but Jim is still out on the streets. He was able to get appeal bail to the county court. Jacob Hergant is also appealing his 1 month prison sentence for his Nazi salute. But Victoria Police, they're continuing to slap on a whole bunch of charges to various National Socialist Network members, not just over August 31st at the Camp Sovereignty, but also over the booing of the Welcome to Country at the Anzac Dawn service using the special legislation of that governs the shrine. So there'll be a big court hearing in the Magistrates Court regarding the August 31st charges in December.
This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net.
It would appear that Queensland is the only state seriously pushing back against the transgender agenda. Back in January this year, Queensland Health Minister Tim Nicholls announced a pause on new under 18s in the state receiving puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones in Queensland public hospitals. So it continues with existing under 18s. And there is also a loophole for under 18s to receive puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones in the private healthcare system. Now, there was a court challenge to his Tim Nicholls' health order by the parent of a transgender child. And last week, the Supreme Court Justice of Queensland, Peter Callaghan, ruled the health order invalid, judging that the January directive establishing the ban was made improperly and unlawful. He ruled that the Health Director General of Queensland, David Rosengren, failed to properly consult the executives of the state hospitals, given that there was only a Microsoft Teams meeting 30 minutes before the announcement by Tim Nicholls. He made this in response to Cairns Public Hospital prescribing puberty blockers to a 12-year-old without parental consent. So there is a review going while this pause is taking place by Victoria's former chief psychiatrist, Professor Ruth Vine. Now, this case was, well, brought before the Queensland Supreme Court by the Queensland LGBTQI Legal Service. And you can see in the corner here, this is who the LGBTQI lobby of Queensland decided to put forth as their spokespeople or spokes-they.
We're here today because we know that all children deserve a healthcare system that allows them to grow up healthy, happy, and with the freedom to be themselves. And Tim Nicholls, Queensland's health minister, has catastrophically overreached. This is an appalling misuse of the political system to achieve a political outcome where he should be making decisions based on health evidence.
They chose the fattest and most strange looking trans activist they could find. I mean, that clearly looked like a man in a dress. I think the person on the left there is a man as well, and then I think that it's a lady on the right who's just dyed her hair. Apparently, women who declare they're transgender or non-binary, they either dye or cut their hair. That's all they seem to do. I thought for a moment that what is it, Jody Hall there, the man that was speaking. I thought for a moment that was maybe Barclay McGain's Halloween costume character, but he went as Matt Canavan in Coalface for Halloween, which I don't know whether it counts as blackface. And now also in another pushback from the Queensland government, the Queensland Minister for Women, Fiona Simpson, she answered a question on notice from the Katters Australia Party leader, Robbie Katter, asking her to outline the state's definition of a woman and whether transgender people were included. She responded that a woman is an adult human female, which, I mean, she gave a straightforward answer and a better answer than the previous Labor Queensland Minister for Women, Shannon Fentiman. But, of course, Anthony Albanese, when he was asked the definition of woman, he said adult human female. But his Minister for Women in the Senate, Katie Gallagher, repeatedly shuts down a debate on Alex Antique's federal inquiry into puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones, saying it'd be damaging to vulnerable young trans people and we need to trust the experts. And I should note that Queensland is not rolling back gender self-ID in that state. Neither is Leah Finocchiari, the Chief Minister of the Northern Territory, even though she said if you're a biological man, you go to a man's prison. Every state and territory in Australia has gender self-ID. The Liberal government of Tasmania, the only other Liberal government, state government in Australia, is certainly not going to roll back, push back against the trans agenda because Jeremy Rockcliffe is a leftist Liberal Premier, as is his new health minister, Bridget Archer, the former member for Bass, who, when she was running for federal re-election for Bass, held up a sign that said she wanted to protect trans youth. So that's who's running the Tasmanian health ministry there. And of course, well, we don't need to go over Victoria as well. It's no progress on the review into the housing of a transgender pedophile in a women's prison. And the Premier of South Australia, Peter Malinauskas, where there was actually a trans sex offender actually sexually assaulted a woman in a woman's prison. Peter Malinauskas said that trans women in women's prisons is not something that's high on his priority. I mean, sure, he's going to win the next election in a landslide, but seriously, you're not interested in the protection of a women, duty of care in custodial settings. And of course, Peter Malinauskas, he sold himself as a social conservative when he was running for premier in 2022.
This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net.
Anthony Albanese is according to the latest news poll, still in a commanding position. So the two-party preferred is Labor 57, the Coalition 43. But if you look at the primary vote, was just released last night. Labor 36%, the Coalition 24%. That's its lowest primary vote in its history. And One Nation surging to 15%, its highest news poll. The Greens at 11%, and the others at 14%. Now, you'd have to say that Susan Lay's leadership of the Federal Liberal Party is terminal. I mean, there was talk that they were going to give her until next year, but given how catastrophic this polling is, they'll have to get rid of her by Christmas.
This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net.
Sorry, I can't switch back to the picture there without pressing the sting there. Now, Susan Ley and the Liberals, they are not cutting through, despite the fact we just had a jump in inflation to over 3%, 3.2% for the year ending September, driven in large part by an increase in electricity prices of 23.6%. And yes, some of that is due to the expiry of state and federal government rebates. But of course, the cost of electricity flows through to the cost of food and government taxes and regulation. That means that price of alcohol and cigarettes continues to rise, which that feeds into crime as well. The cost of housing, it's given that the various red tape there. The property market had a hot October, meaning that property prices are rising again, which of course may be good for boomers who already have a house and property portfolio, but not for young people, young couples trying to get into the housing market. So given the surge in electricity prices, that there was also another poll that found that 52% of Australians believe the country is heading in the wrong direction compared to 35% who think it is. So it's Susan Ley and the Liberals under her leadership, her approval rating has absolutely plummeted in the news poll and in other polls as well. And so of course, there was supposed to be the big showdown in the Liberal Party room last Friday over net zero, but it was just a meeting of backbenchers. Susan Ley wasn't even there. She was in North Queensland to visit the site of the latest federal government bailout to manufacturing hub, the Tomago Schmelter in North Queensland, which Rio Tinto, it's majority owned. They've said that they'll probably close in 2028 due to the price of electricity because it's very electricity intensive. So when is it? The Australian public, they are going to get impatient. When are we going to get the $275 off a power bill that was promised by Anthony Albanese in 2022? When is Chris Bowen? When is renewables going to be the cheapest form of electricity? He's fighting freedom of information requests for his climate documents because they're probably really embarrassing and shows that he's been seriously misleading. But so the Susan Ley, she wasn't even at that net zero meeting on Friday. Then on the weekend, the National Party's Federal Council voted to dump the net zero mandate by 2050. Then the Nationals Party room on Sunday agreed with that. Only their policy is to only reduce emissions in line with the OECD average. Now, the Liberal Party has to decide their position. Susan Ley met with her senior shadow ministers, and it seems that depends on who you listen to. According to some journalists, the moderates are coming around to dumping the net zero mandate by 2050, but they still want to commit to emissions reductions. But I'll tell you what, if the Liberals do dump net zero mandate by 2050 and focus on electricity affordability, they can turn this around, because the polls were this bad for the Liberal Party in 2008 and 2009 under the Rudd government, when Brendan Nelson and Malcolm Turnbull were Liberal leaders. Remember Kevin Rudd saying that climate change is the great moral challenge of our generation. And it was only when Tony Abbott became leader and dumped Malcolm Turnbull's policy of agreeing to Rudd's carbon emissions reduction scheme, and then he had his direct action policy. Then in early 2010, the polls tightened, and then, of course, Rudd was dumped, and then Gillard was installed, and then there was the hung parliament of 2010. It took another 3 years for Tony Abbott to lead a landslide election victory to repeal the carbon tax. Can the Liberals follow this? I know that Peter Dutton, when he was opposition leader, tried to play the Abbott playbook, which was just go play the wrecker, attack. Of course, he had his alternate energy policy, nuclear, but keeping net zero. Liberals have lost, the coalition have lost 2 elections now, campaigning for net zero. And they have to try something, actually putting an alternative, because who knows, it's 2.5 years away, the federal election, the voters could be out for baseball bats when the electricity prices continue to go up. Inflation is not under control. There is not going to be a rate cut tomorrow in a Reserve Bank board meeting that stops the nation at 2:30 before the 3 p.m. Flemington race. It's probably going to remain at 4.10%, though I think interest rates should actually go up, because no way inflation can be defeated with interest rates in just the 4. And now, if the Liberals, as it's looking like they are doing, dump net zero as a policy, they will need a different salesman. I use the word man than Susan Ley, because clearly the novelty of the first female Liberal leader has worn off very, very quickly. she is showing really bad political judgment in calling for Kevin Rudd to be sacked as ambassador when, obviously, when Donald Trump said, I don't like you either and probably never will. She was deemed to have overreached because her backbench and frontbench colleagues didn't back her up. Neither did most of them when she called on Anthony Albanese to apologise for his Joy Division shirt, given that the punk band named it after a Nazi concentration camp division, which raped concentration camp women. But in the 70s, that was what punk bands did, the shock value there. Joy Division, they're not Nazi supporters or sympathizers. In fact, one of the members now expresses regret about that. But Susan Ley decided to call for Anthony Albanese to apologize because Sherry Markson has been running hot with it on her Sky After Dark show and dug up Anthony Albanese in 2022, an interview where he learned for the first time the name, the inspiration for the name of Joy Division. And he said, I probably wish I didn't know that. Maybe Anthony Albanese buried it in his memory and he decided not to remember it. And I think Angie Bell, her environment spokesman as well, decided to back her up with that. We've been seeing a lot of Angie Bell, the member for Moncrief on the Gold Coast, because Murray Watt, the environment minister, is trying to sell that our environmental laws are not fit for purpose and they need to be reformed. There needs to be a federal environmental protection agency. It's all, whenever he opens his mouth about this, it's all gobbledygook. He's not selling it on me at all. But again, literally, we have no opposition here. As I mentioned, they'll need a different front man. Is Andrew Hastie ready? Andrew Hastie has again been criticised this week for raising concerns about the stillbirth baby parenting payment, that there could be a loophole for late-term abortions, women who have late-term abortions to gain the payment. So there's been a pile-on against him with that. Angus Taylor, does he want the job? I mean, remember, he's also very gaff-prone. Tim Wilson, could he be the compromise candidate? He made a social media remark today, some joke about the weather. I think he did, and it would never happen under a Wilson government. That sort of reminded me of how when Bernie Finn was an MLC, he said if something really irritated him, he said would never happen under a Finn government. I don't know if that's where Tim Wilson got the idea, but maybe he's having making a subtle leadership pitch there. Now, Anthony Albanese is back in Australia after the ASEAN summit, but not for long because, of course, there's APEC, I think there's still the East Asia summit to go, and he could still go to the COP25 meeting in Brazil, where the Brazilian government is trying to clear the streets of criminal gangs, and there's been about over 60 who've been killed, and the violence because Prince William, the heir to the throne of Britain, is jetting in. He is a climate zealot like his father, King Charles, which of course brings me to one of the two big stories to come out of Britain this past week. The Andrew formerly known as Prince. So Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, as he is now to be known, he'd already said that he would be relinquishing the title of the Duke of York, but now King Charles has stripped him of his title as Prince, so he's the Andrew formerly known as Prince, and this is over his clear lies about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. And it turns out that his ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson, the former Duchess of York, she can't even call herself the Duchess of Pork now in Weight Watchers commercials. Sarah Ferguson was just as cozy with Epstein as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, and they courted his money and his friendship after he had been convicted and sentenced for sex trafficking of a minor. And more has come out in Virginia Giuffre's memoir, From Beyond the Grave. And King Charles has also evicted him from Royal Lodge, where he's been living without paying the rent that any commoner would pay in a British property. But he's not being left homeless. He is going to be living at Sandringham Estate. And there's also some talk now that Commonwealth nations such as Australia officially remove him from the line of succession. There's even talk of stripping him of his military honours as well. But a lot of this does seem to be, it's damage control by King Charles, but also having his own stamp on the monarchy, that he's going to hold bad behaviour by royals in his family to account. There's also talk of a British parliamentary inquiry into Prince Andrew's finances and relationships with Epstein. Of course, maybe it's because Keir Starmer's government is looking for any distraction or a dead cat strategy to distract from the continuing horror that is occurring on the streets of Britain. And now there was 2 horrific stabbings last week in Britain. The first one occurred in London. There was the stabbing murder of 49-year-old Wayne Broadhurst while he was walking his dog. He noticed that 22-year-old Safi Dawood, a Afghan national. He was an illegal immigrant who got asylum status. He attacked a 45-year-old man and his 14-year-old son, and Wayne Broadhurst, being a good Samaritan, decided to intervene, and so Safi Dawood decided that he would stab him to death. Now, neighbours, they heroically rushed out with baseball bats to restrain Dawood. So this is just, those good Samaritans who try to do the right thing, they tend to be either injured or murdered themselves, or they get charged with trying to protect people. Then we had the Huntingdon train stabbing. So he's finally being named. The Anthony Williams, the 32-year-old British national of Caribbean descent, being charged with 10 counts of attempted murder. So this was on a train from Peterborough to London's King's Cross station. So thankfully, it looks like that all 10 people will survive. There is 2 in life-threatening conditions. 5 have been discharged so far. There were actually 2 black men who were detained. I'm surprised that they were described as black of Caribbean descent, because normally they don't like to give the race. I think they did that, the Metropolitan Police, because they wanted to, I think, communicate in their own way that this was not Islamic terrorism, because, of course, black Caribbeans, they are Christians. Countries like Jamaica, which of course has been affected by a devastating hurricane, very Christian country, as are a lot of the other Afro-Caribbean nations. And so it has been termed a mental health episode. And of course, Anthony Williams was known to police. Allegedly, there was voices in his head that were talking to him while he was doing this. But, and again, there's eerily similar horrific violent crimes happening in Britain that are occurring here in Victoria. Britain, it's another symptom of the nation's decline. Inflation is also surging under Keir Starmer. His Chancellor, his Treasurer, Rachel Reeves, Rachel Thieves, is trying to invent more taxes. In fact, she's trying to have a tax on people who are fleeing Britain to get away. So basically an exit tax. Would you call it a Checkpoint Charlie tax? So Britain is... People don't feel safe anywhere in Britain. I would not say Victoria's as bad there. Certainly, I would say Victoria is more on the path to Hotel California, a one-party state. And now, I should segue into the Californian gubernatorial race is not until first Tuesday in November next year, where Katie Porker is still the leading candidate. That really nasty fat woman. Now, next, a WilmsFront Snapshot news program on Monday, 8:30 p.m. Melbourne time. I will cover the results of the US off-year elections that are occurring tomorrow. Well, we'll know the results on Wednesday. So that is Governor of New Jersey, Governor of Virginia, and Mayor of New York City.
This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net.
Thank you, everyone, for watching tonight and for your comments in the chat. Please still like and leave a comment after the show, and also share. Remember, you can support all Unshackled productions and our articles on the Unshackled.net by supporting us at Substack. You can also sign up for free to get our email alerts as well, or take out a membership on the Unshackled.net/membership. Other ways you can become notified of new Unshackled articles and upcoming Unshackled productions is by subscribing to mine or the Unshackled social media. So most active on X, Facebook, Gab, and Telegram. And I will later in the week publish a fresh report from Tiger Mountain with Richard Wollstonecroft. I'll let you know when I've got a new WilmsFront featured interview show to lock in. And I will see you all next Monday. Good night, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to WilmsFront. Visit timwilms.com to view the archive of episodes. And keep visiting the Unshackled.net to view all our shows. And to keep up with the latest real news and analysis.